Welcome, one and all, to our adult Sunday school class for our last Sunday in the month of April 2025. Alrighty, we are in the book of Exodus, but before we get to there, I thought we'd have a little fun just because I'm like that. Let's see. So on Friday, we went to the planetarium, which I thank you again. That was very cool. I had a great time.
In looking at that, I'm sure y'all, if you got that little blue schedule thing.
Yeah.
That it has ages.
Yeah.
So I guess most everything is geared for the
Yeah.
educational thing, and except for the Christmas one, it showed kind of interest. It looked interesting.
Yeah. Oh, I'd check out all of them because that's just the nerd I am. But yeah, so fun stuff. Yeah, well, I had a great time. So I thought I would take a moment to refresh blasts from our past. Constellations in the Bible in our Sunday school classes that we have looked at.
Okay, what is this?
Constellations.
It's in the constellation.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So our first mention of constellations was back at the time before the Tower of Babel, when the sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan were setting sail in their reed boats down the Persian Gulf and around and up to around Saudi Arabia and up into Africa, where Cush settled what we now call Ethiopia and Sudan. They're originally called Cush, and the people there were Cushites in ancient times. Mizraim went up into Egypt. He's the founder of Egypt in the year 2773 BC, according to my looking at things. And then Put went on to Libya, and then the Phoenicians, and then Canaan went, you guessed it, Canaan, on up through there. So with Mizraim going to Egypt, by the way, Egyptians don't call themselves Egyptians. They say, I'm El Mazri, I'm of Mizraim, this guy from the Bible, Noah's grandson through Ham. And so his name, Azri, means I'm actually of Asser or of Ashur, the false god who the Assyrians were later named for. And we'll see that Asher is at what we did see back at the time, is actually one of the associations with Nimrod, the first real big empire guy and elevated to God status and stuff. Also known in Egyptian as Osiris and all that stuff. So looking at the constellations, here's the constellation Orion. And here we see what's called the dog star Sirius. You've seen the ads for Sirius XM and they've got the little dog. That's why, because it's called the dog star. That's Sirius, and I'm serious about this. So, so what we have is what happened this year that I believe was the year that Mizraim went to there, 2773 BC. The heliacal, that means rising with the sun, rising of Sirius occurred on June 21st. Sirius, you don't always see. He's hidden from us. Then he starts to rise in the early summer. And so the rising of the dog star Sirius, it happened on June 21st in 2773 BC, but I believe the year Mizraim went there, marks the beginning of the Egyptian New Year and the first day of the month of Thoth in the season of Akhet. The summer solstice also fell on June 21st, 2773 BC. So I believe that the Egyptian calendar was started with the year that Mizraim went there, and is based on the rising of this dog star, and that the first day of the solstice, that was their beginning of their calendar with the arrival of him there. So there's Orion there, and Orion, that star right there, and that shoulder, that is Betelgeuse. There's Orion right there. And so there's that little tidbit. I last taught this in 2020, so I showed it how it was in the current year I was teaching. So that was 5 years ago. So let's see. Boom, 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 click, escape. Now I want to fast forward to slide 1. This is back when I was doing PowerPoint before I started doing Google Earth. 142. So speaking of Nimrod. Yes. I'm a little slideshow transitions here. So here are the different gods that he's been represented as, Resheph and whatnot. Here we see, this is a cartouche where you have the hieroglyphs for the name, the symbols here. This is the all-powerful eye, the all-seeing eye. And I was able to point this out to Alyssa when we went to the Renaissance Fair in Visalia and we saw the falconers. And if you looked at the one of the falcons, I said, look at the eye. And the eye was exactly this. I mean, the eye on the falcon, it looked like it was painted. And I said, that is where the Egyptians, who refer back to the falcon god Horus, in fact, where in Rome they have Caesar this and Caesar that. And Germany, they have Kaiser this and Kaiser that. And Russia, they had Tsar, which was all based on Caesar. In Egypt, they had Horus. Horus referring to the falcon, which was the one who came from far away. And so that's actually a reference back to Noah. And so, but yeah, so this all-seeing eye that Alyssa got to see on the falcon, that's what the Egyptians took for their imagery, their iconography. And so there's that. But all these things are different variations of Nimrod, including Orion. Orion, the hunter in the sky, is Nimrod, the hunter. That's all. And looks like he was the first guy who took the zodiac and made false gods out of them and drew people away from the worship of the one true God, Nimrod. He's like the father of all of this stuff. And so let's see, there's that. And one other thing of interest. And so his uncle, Mizraim, because Nimrod is the son of Cush. Cush was the king of the city of Uruk when rebuilding after the flood. Well, then his son Nimrod became king after him, and then Cush, leaving his son in charge, set sail with his brothers, and then they established all these places in Egypt. So Mizraim was referencing his nephew by taking the name Mizraim of Ashar, one of the names for Nimrod. And so let's see, fast forward down to a lot of the names we have in the Bible aren't necessarily names they were born with. They're names that were kind of assigned to them or that they took on. But they're definitely names associated with them, absolutely. We're going to go a ways down here. After the Tower of Babel, after Egypt has its dynasties. Yeah.
Did he name the constellation?
They've been known by different names. The first scripture we have, the oldest scripture we have, is the book of Job. And in the book of Job, it mentions Orion. It mentions the Pleiades and the bear and all that stuff. So different societies and cultures have different names. And so whether that name was known then and carried over, or it's just been an anachronism where they take the modern name for it and just substitute it so we know what they're talking about, both things happen. Some of these names are ancient. Some of them have just been updated to what we call them.
Right, somebody is looking to create, like say, he created false gods.
Yes. Yes.
So he spends night after night laying on his back, looking around for stars that he can connect the dots to.
Yeah.
Basically.
Literally and figuratively. Yeah. So fast forwarding to the 2400s BC. So 100 years after the Tower of Babel, we have in the fourth dynasty, we have these underground grottos, underground chambers that bubble up to the surface. And then they've got shafts and plugs and all that stuff. Grottos set out here, on top of which the great pyramids of Giza, 1, 2, 3, were built. They're built on top of these grottos, okay? The grottos were there first, and the pyramids were built on top of them. The famous Great Pyramids of Giza that you see here, Khafre and Nefer and all that stuff, Cheops, those are all built on top of these grottos. And there's Orion right there, by the way. So what's curious or interesting about that? Let's see if I can get that to drag down. Is that look at the exact center of the pyramids put right over those grottos. They line up perfectly with Orion's belt. And as big and massive as these things are, those tips perfectly are aligned with that. So here's my thought. Those first dynasty underground grottos before the pyramids, which were fourth dynasty, those grottos were built to align with Orion's belt going back to Nimrod, Mizraim's nephew, who was the king of Uruk. Enmerkar in Sumerian, Enmer the hunter in Akkadian and all that, who was reigning at the time that Mizraim first conquered Egypt. And their pyramids were later built exactly on top. So I thought that was fun. Kind of refresh. Been a couple of years since we've looked at that. The other things, we'll stop the PowerPoint, and now let's go to Google Earth. A lot more recent stuff here, constellation-wise. see. Google Earth. So it was on September 11th, Ashley's birthday in 3 BC, that we have Revelation 12, verses 1 to 2, actually playing out. Revelation 12, 1 to 2 says, I'm not quite there yet on Wednesday nights. Revelation 12, verse 2, 1 to 2 says, John writes, a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet. And on her head, the crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth. This happened. The constellation Virgo looked exactly like this, being lit up by the sun. In fact, this shows what it actually would have looked like. Kind of hard to read the constellation there. But here's the sun lighting up Virgo, and she's got the moon at her feet. This all aligned and fell into place on September 11th of 3 BC, which is the first day, Tishri, the first of the Hebrew calendar in that year, which looks to be the date of Christ's conception by the Virgin Mary. And so if we fast forward from there, a little hard to see, but as we saw Friday night, Virgo follows Leo. Leo is the lion, Leo, Jesus, the Lion of Judah, and all that stuff, royalty. Right there is the star Regulus, regal, royal again. There's Regulus compared to our sun and Jupiter. Jupiter, the king planet, named for Zeus. Jupiter is Rome's version of Greek Zeus. And so there's Regulus, there's the king star in the king constellation. And there it is again. And so what we have is the planet Jupiter, the wandering star, the Aster Planetis. Planet means just wandering star. So the wandering star of Jupiter, everything in the sky was called a star, just what type of star. So it would go into retrograde, it would pass Regulus, then come back and come back again the way it looked from our perspective. So here it is doing the 3 laps around Regulus at this moment of time, getting the attention of stargazers from the east, the 3 wise men. And see, there it is zooming out. There is Jupiter dancing around Regulus saying, hey, 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 there's something to see. So you got king planet, king star, and king constellation all here. And then 9 months after the conception, 9 months after the Virgo with the clothed with the sun and the moon at her feet, you have the king planet coming near the planet of love, the brightest star in our brightest planet in our solar system. You've got them coming together from our perspective. And this is actually what it looked like using our software programs that we have, Sky Safari and others. And so on June 17th of 2 BC, we have the Bethlehem star. We have the king planet moving in with the bright star to signify the birth of Jesus Christ. Seems to be how this is all timing and falling into place. And so the wise men would see that. And that's how close they came, looking in proximity. Of course, as she did an excellent job pointing out, things look close, but actually the space between them is large, just how it looks from our perspective. Again, Tuesday, June 17th, 2 BC, for the potential birth of Jesus Christ, 9 months after the conception. So that's what, looking from where they were, looking east towards Israel, that's what they would have seen. That's how, there's Regulus, the king star, how bright that is. Look how bright this coming together of Jupiter and Venus is. That's what they would have seen looking at the Bethlehem star. And so they see that, they start making their way over. They come to Jerusalem. They find out Jesus was born in Bethlehem. They go to Bethlehem. And what happens? We have the king planet, the wandering star, the star of Bethlehem, Jupiter, going into retrograde again. And it stops before it goes back. So it stops right over Bethlehem, just as the Bible says. When does the star stop over Bethlehem and they make the 6-mile journey on the same day to go see the house that Jesus is in now that he's 6 months old? There's Bethlehem coming from Jerusalem. The star stopped, the wandering star, the planet Jupiter, stopped on December 25th. So on December 25th, Jupiter stops over Bethlehem and the wise men come down and give Jesus presents. And then it goes back from there, continuing into January. So I thought that'd be a kind of a fun refresher on some things from constellations and the biblical impact on things and perspectives on those. So yeah, that is that. And now back to our regularly scheduled programming. But reactions, thoughts, or questions on that refresher of all that constellation stuff? Yeah. And but let me rephrase. Jupiter and other planets do go into retrograde. It's a running joke with our family that anytime people are just acting crazy and stupid or wiggy, we say Mercury must be in retrograde today. And oftentimes, yeah. So planets do go into retrograde, which all it really means is they're traveling at their constant speed as we're traveling at our constant speed. It's just in our overlapping and passing of each other. Sometimes it looks like they're catching up to us, then they're slowing down and going back, and then they go up again. So that's what happens. What we saw with the Bethlehem star has never happened before or after, with the coming together of Jupiter and Venus like that at that moment in time. That coinciding of them, nothing like it before or after. That was like the brightest thing ever. That thing, yeah, that was a one time. Yeah.
It just makes sense to me too that God, I mean, what's that verse about the heavens manifest?
Yes, absolutely. You're so right.
God, like that.
Absolutely. That's in the Psalms.
It just makes, yeah, Psalms. It just
And,
makes sense
yeah.
that God would use his, incredible creation to present himself.
Absolutely.
show himself.
The heavens
Yeah.
declare, and you're so right. And the scriptures even talk about the stars speaking. Now, there's no atmosphere in space to carry sound waves, but the stars are telling a story by their movement. And so, yeah. And proclaiming these things and lining up with these events.
They're talking about how, the earth is positioned and how if it was any closer to the sun, we'd burn up. If it was any further from the sun, we'd freeze to death. There's just, to me, how can you not see the intelligent design in that? How
Just
can you not-
amazing random coincidences. So many of them.
There's not found any other place. We've not in all, all the searches and hunting that the telescopes and astronomers,
Well,
have done.
And yeah,
We're unique.
what Star Trek calls M-class planets.
Yeah.
They don't exist. A planet
We're-
like Earth. No, you have to terraform. You have to.
If there's water, there's life,
I'm so glad you said that, because here's the thing with water. Okay, ice caps, for example, on Mars, ice, frozen water, right? Well, it's been recently realized that, these ice caps on Mars, they're a lot younger than we were expecting for millions and billions of years of the universe and all that stuff. So something's wrong. Gee, I wonder. But not only that, talking about water, water exists in vapor in the heavens and space and interstellar and all that stuff. Water exists, as we've seen, ice on Mars and all that stuff. The one form water never has been found to exist in anywhere else in the universe, liquid. Only here, where we and animals and plants drink and
It's
consume
so
it.
unique. It's so
Yes.
unique. So, what is the thing about, you put a bunch of monkeys in a room, eventually one of them's gonna, with a typewriter, they're gonna type out a
Shakespeare or something.
Shakespeare or something. Not necessarily.
No.
Yeah. Not
And that's just it. For everything to just be random, two things. One, it's a physical impossibility for things to one small change at a time evolve into something else, because it has to function at every moment in time. It still has to completely function. You take something out of whack and it's not going to function anymore. You've broken the ecosystem. You've broken, and so it doesn't work. It has to completely function. So you can't go progressive slow changes over time. It just doesn't work. And we've never seen that. And so secondly, even if the universe were as old as folks like to claim that it is, that is still, you do the math, you run the odds, that is still not enough time for everything to have randomly fallen into place the way it has, because it wasn't random and it couldn't be random. So yeah.
It's just incredible.
And with that, Charles Darwin, who got the idea for his thing from his cousin who wrote about the ages and so rocks, and then he took evolution from there. Their understanding of the human cell was so basic compared to what we know now with our micron microscopes, all the technology we have now. The cells are so fascinating. And I mean, not only the details of an atom, proton, neutron, electron, but also the particles within those, subatomic particles. There's such intricate design, and interesting things are done in threes too, kind of like a trinity. But there's such a fascinating design. They had no concept of the complexity. It's so complex. Again, can't just be randomly slapped together. Yeah, so cool stuff. So that brings us to a quick refresh on the Exodus. Here we are in Exodus chapter 32, dealing with the golden calf and those adventures. So we are in the year 1446 BC, about August now. They left in March, April timeframe. So they've been there, took a 2-month journey to get here. So now time's moving on. They're in August at the foot of Mount Sinai. So we've got here a reminder from the oldest to newest, from bottom to top. Joseph in the 12th dynasty, those pharaohs we talked about in the devotional. Hammurabi, 13th dynasty. Now we're up here with the Exodus, Pharaoh Dudimos and the Exodus Sea and loss of the army. So we're at this point here where the Amalekites joined up with others and became the 14th dynasty, ruling in the north, the early Hyksos, foreigners. We've got the remnants of the 13th dynasty pushed farther down to the south with their leaders. And so we'll go on from there, but this is where the time frame we are at here. So we've got, so Middle Bronze Age 2B, Ren is ruling the Shang dynasty in China. Ibi something Matre is pharaoh of the 13th dynasty, still in their second intermediate period. And Nubusiri Ya'amu is the foreign king of the 14th dynasty, those early Hyksos and Amalekites. Amidatana in the tribe of Judah, line of Christ. Excuse me, I misspoke there. Amidatana, the great-grandson of Hammurabi, is king of Babylon now. In the line of Christ, tribe of Judah, Aminadab, I'm guessing, is 98, and his son Nahshon, I'm guessing, is 39. He's the 28th generation of Adam. He'll be grandpa to Boaz and third great to David. So let's refresh real quick. Exodus 32. So let's see. At Mount Sinai here. There's the top where Moses met with God. There is... there's Joel Richardson, who we're quoting from, the dimensions that were given for the promised land. There's Moses's altar, and where the 70 elders met up top there. There's a zoom in of Moses's altar and where the sacrifices were made, and they still have ashes over there. Yeah, 70 altars met and had the wedding feast up there. Then Moses went alone to the top. And here we are with the cow drawings that we've seen, including the drawings of worshipers being pierced through with the swords that we looked at last week. So Exodus 32, let's pick up in verse 19. Exodus 32:19, and it came about as soon as Moses approached the camp, he saw the calf and the people dancing, and Moses' anger burned, and he threw the tablets from his hands and shattered them to pieces at the foot of the mountain. Then he took the calf which they had made and completely burned it with fire, ground it to powder, and scattered it over the surface of the water, and made the sons of Israel drink it. Then Moses said to Aaron, "What did this people do to you that you have brought such a great sin upon them?" And Aaron said, "Do not let the anger of my Lord burn. You know the people yourself, that they are prone to evil. For they said to me, 'Make a god for us who will go before us.' For this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what happened to him. So I said to them, 'Whoever has any gold, let them tear it off.' Then they gave it to me, and I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf." I laugh every time I read that. Verse 25, now when Moses saw that the people were out of control, for Aaron had let them get out of control to the point of being an object of ridicule among their enemies, Moses then stood at the gate of the camp and said, "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." And all the sons of Levi gathered together to him. And he said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Every man of you put his sword on his thigh, go back and forth from gate to gate in the camp, and kill every man his brother, and every man his friend, and every man his neighbor." So the sons of Levi did as Moses instructed, and about 3,000 men of the people fell that day. Then Moses said, "Dedicate yourselves today to the Lord, for every man has been against his son and against his brother, in order that he may bestow a blessing upon you today. So, Jonathan Cahn from our prior Wednesday night classes, he makes this point in The Return of the Gods. The first case of national apostasy recorded in Scripture is that of Israel's fall at Mount Sinai. While Moses stands on the mountaintop receiving the Ten Commandments, the people of Israel wait at the mountain's base. Growing impatient at his delayed return, they decide to make a god of molten metal in the image of an egel, the bull calf. After creating the idol, they hold a celebration in its honor. They feast and drink with music and festivity, offer up sacrifices on its altar, and as the scriptures record, corrupt themselves. Then comes the judgment. So, and that's what we see playing out. David Rohl, Egyptologist, shares this. What they saw before them was tangible, touchable, comforting, not like the nebulous, invisible, angry God of Moses, whom they so feared. The people rejoiced at their return to the worship of the benevolent Egyptian goddess of love and fertility, cow goddess Hathor from Egyptian times. The celebration continued through the night. And there's also the male bull, the Apis bull, associated with pharaohs and kings. Meanwhile, that very evening, Moses had descended from his retreat on the peak, spent the night with Hoshea, Joshua's original name, in the hollow. At dawn, the two men descended from the mountain, old man supported by the young, as he carried a pair of large stone tablets bearing the 10 words commanded by Yahweh. Those words, which we know as the 10 Commandments, were carved in the world's most ancient alphabet. Scholars call the script Proto-Sinaitic, because it would first be discovered scratched on the rocks of the Mafket mines at Serbet el-Kadim, around the copper mines of the Wal Magara in central West Sinai Peninsula. The signs which represent the letters of the alphabet are Egyptian hieroglyphs, but they cannot be read as Egyptian words because they're Semitic Hebrew letters. So the ox represents the Aleph, the I is the word Hebrew Ein, the house sign is the letter B, Bet, for Beth, like Beth Israel, Bethel and all that stuff, Bethlehem. So this new invention that would eventually evolve into the Greek and subsequently modern alphabets, including ours, was the creation of the Hebrews, originally back to Joseph. They had taken the Egyptian symbols and adapted them for writing their names and a few simple phrases in their own language. The 10 Commandments and the laws of Moses written in this Proto-Sinaitic or Proto-Hebrew. The prophet of Yahweh, Moses, master of both the Egyptian and Mesopotamian epic literature, was not only the father, in this case, of this version of Judaism and Christianity and through the Quran traditions, even Islam, as they trace back here, but also, thanks to Joseph, the progenitor of the Hebrew, Canaanite, Phoenician, Greek, and modern Western alphabetic scripts. This is where it really comes into use. It helped the Israelites get by while they were in Egypt because the blue-collar Hebrews couldn't read the social elite hieroglyphics. Blue-collar Egyptians couldn't either. So God writes on, remember, it wasn't Moses, but God who with his finger wrote on the 10 Commandments, but he wrote it in their language that they would recognize and understand, which was this early Hebrew, the world's first alphabet. So reactions or thoughts on that? Share this from Richardson. We'll close here. Moses' first act was to publicly annul the marriage covenant. Moses threw the tablets onto the rocky ground and broke them before the whole assembly. And he quotes someone else, a gentleman named Sarna. Sarna says, this was not an impetuous act. Rather, it quite deliberately signified the abrogation of the covenant. The covenant is finished. The wedding ceremony was not even complete and the deal was off. Done deal. First, by making the people drink the remains of the idol, Moses was making them literally internalize and personally bear the responsibility for their own sins. Second, little graphic here, by mixing the remains of the idol into their only water supply, Moses saw to it that the residue of the idol would actually pass through their bodies and become human waste on the ground. One can hear the chiding tone of the Lord later on in Deuteronomy 32, verse 37. God says, now where are your gods? Yeah. So there's God's very real and down to earth and practical on some things. This was the ultimate act of humiliation. Third, the point is that by having the people drink a mixture of water and the ashes of the idol, Moses was clearly communicating people had, like an unfaithful wife, committed adultery and violated the marriage covenant. And so, yeah, so that was the picture there. And that's what brought us to 4.5 miles away from the camp, the cemetery. And so, boom, and boom. So it was like 21 football fields, I think, was the area here where they've got thousands of graves like this one. That thing stands 6 foot tall. And there are others further out all throughout here. So yeah, that was a big deal that happened there. Let's see. Where we'll go next, I'll save for next week because that's actually pretty interesting. Not that other stuff isn't, but that's worth saving for next time around. Seeing the time as well. But any reactions, thoughts, comments, questions on this, Brother Clay?
Question.
Yeah.
When Moses took the golden calf and threw it back in the fire, then broke it into pieces or dust, scattered it in the water, and made them drink from it. What was the purpose of that? Poison it?
No, it was the things that Joel Richardson and quoting the other gentleman, Sarna, were talking about. One, to internalize it. Yeah, hey, you did this, you own this, you drink the poison that you partook of. Two, to show how useless the false gods are. Look, you're eliminating it through your body. It's coming out in your waste now. And three, to show that this was, your partaking of this was an idolatry. It was a adultery, spiritual adultery here. You partaking and taking this in. It's not just, so your outward worship was an inward adultery. And so making it personal by literally partaking of it in that sense was kind of the idea that's thought there. That helps. Yeah. So Lord, of course, we'll move them forward from here and we'll get to that. But any other reactions, thoughts, comments, questions on the golden calf, the action of the Levites, and then Moses's directions for here and having 3,000 to bury. All right. So yeah, we'll stop here for this moment. We're going to stop our screen share and stop recording, and let's get ready, Brother Clay, to grab the others, and we'll go before the Lord in song.
The Hebrew didn't kick off.
Okay.